And we are live. Welcome everybody in Mining Vervaeke. And today is a subject that I understand really, really little. Like I'm here to learn. And it's called opponent processing. That hopefully the panel from Mining Vervaeke, the panel from the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server can help me out with. And we have in the room Valeria, Ebenezer, Peter, and Harris. Thank you guys for being here. So, as I said, the subject is opponent processing. And here is like the summary that I found. Opponent processing is a concept that John uses to explain how cognitive agents can realize relevance in a complex dynamic world. He argues that relevance realization is achieved by a dynamical system that makes use of the opponent processing relationships, which are trade-offs between opposing constraints or goals that balance each other out. For example, an agent has to balance between being specific and being general, being stable or being adaptable, being diverse or being coherent, and so on. So that's the one I found. Yeah, and I would like you guys to tell me what did you find about opponent processing. Let's start with Harris.
Okay, thank you, Kara, for also hosting this. First of all, I wanted to just say that opponent processing is something that personally I find very interesting as a topic. Is one of the, I personally believe, one of the most interesting concepts that John Vervaeke keeps talking about. Interestingly enough, it's something that I also understand from, let's say, from other sources as well. So it is interesting to go through, let's say, the literature a bit in order to prepare for this live stream. What I wanted to share about what I found, let's say the best summary that I found, it's the following. Opponent processing is a concept that explains how we imbalance opposing forces or tendencies in our behavior and perception. This is also have to do with a recent paper published by John, along with another author, and that it states that opponent processing relates to an activism, which is a view that cognition emerges from or is constituted from sensory motor activity. In this sense, opponent processing can help us adapt to different situations by allowing us to regulate our emotions, achieve optimal grip, and cope with uncertainty and complexity. So this is the summary of everything that I've managed to pull together. Just to give a shout out to this paper from back in 2021 from John and Gary Hovannisian. It's called An Activist Big Five Theory, and it was published in the Journal of Phenomenology and the Cognitive Sciences. This is for the introduction for now.
Thank you so much. That was really well prepared and researched. Thank you, Harris. And Peter, what did you find?
Well, I reviewed my notes that I took from Vervaeke's series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, when he spoke about it briefly. It was a little later on in the series when he started talking about the more complex theory regarding relevance realization. But what I can recall from it is that opponent processing is when you have two processes or systems that are integrated together, but they're also in opposition. It's not an antagonistic opposition. They're not trying to destroy each other, but they do have conflicting immediate goals. And the example that he gave in the series was the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So both of them serve the same meta goal, but the immediate goal that they have are directly opposed to each other. And so it's through this process of being in opposition to each other that it can provide some kind of function for the organism to find the proper balance for a certain situation. And so it's with opponent processing, you can get a higher degree of adaptation than you would for having something that was always static the entire time. And so that's my understanding of opponent processing.
That definitely enriches my understanding. Thank you. Ebenezer.
Me, opponent processing is an interesting one that we all sort of live in. Like when I heard about it first, it was something that I could see almost, I could see helping me almost every day of my life. Yeah. But I think of opponent processing as like a system with two different goals or motives. One, both contradicting each other, like the others have said. But it's for the purpose of the system that they're in. Two things opposing each other for the purpose of the system that they're in. Yeah. And it seems like it increases the adaptability of the system, the system in a whole. Yeah. Like the left and the right ear, both of them hearing different, like hearing from different directions, but they allow you to know exactly where a sound is coming from. Yeah.
Interesting. And Valeria.
Yeah. So the way I would put it, instead of contradiction, two systems working for the same goal, but biased in different directions. So if you'd have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, for example, the sympathetic is looking for cues in the world that you should be more physiologically aroused. Like it's looking for things to be agitated, worried, in fight or flight, excited, heart beating fast. That's what it's biased to pay attention to. The sympathetic, it's biased to see the world as opportunities to chill, relax, heart rate going down, emphasizing on healing, digesting, resting, and all this. But they are both working for the well-being of the organism. I was thinking about it and see if that makes sense to you, my example. So if I want to keep my phone, or even get something bigger, if I want to keep that here, my left hand can only push to the right. My right hand can only push to the left. So that hand, its job is to not let the thing fall to this side, and that hand, its job is not to let the thing. They are pushing in different directions, but they are both maintaining the thing upright. They are working for the same goal of maintaining that thing upright, but they are actually pushing in opposing directions. I don't know if that helps, but that was the thing that I thought that might. One thing that is important is the concept of trade-off. Because when we're talking about opponent processing, we're talking about things that have some kind of trade-off relationship. So with the difficulty of thinking about those things is that we tend to think in terms of good or bad. If something is good, we always want more of it. If something is bad, we always want less of it. But in truth, a lot of things are in a trade-off relationship. So if you have more of it, you will have less of another thing. If you have, for example, if I am prepared to spend a lot of energy, if I am physiologically aroused, I will be more prepared for running. I will have more energy. I will be more excited. But the healing and the digestive system, they all diminish. If I am physiologically less aroused, my body is healing, my digestion is working well, the immune system is working well, but I have less energy to run, to do things. So one important thing that I think when thinking about opponent processes is this trade-off relationships. Not that something that is always good or always bad, but increasing it, you decrease something else, and decreasing it, you increase something else. Yeah, you got what I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
It does. So I understand it's as a balance that we function in the world, and we find kind of hard to explain the balance in between going there or there, pushing there or there. I visually can imagine it, maybe not the difference between light and the dark, but let's say a heat and the shade. And so we do need light, we do need the heat as well, but too much of it and we burn out. And so we need a shade, but like in a shade we understand the light. I don't know if it makes sense.
Think about virtues, like we do in dialogues. We often think about it like in the face of danger, should I face it with courage, or should I retreat with caution and prudence? Yeah. There is no answer to that question. Depends on the situation.
Virtues, you'd say. Yeah.
Okay. I think I slightly understand it better. If it makes sense. That's it.
That is my understanding anyway. I'm also learning. I need a lot to learn yet.
No, that's really good. And also this notion that Kara picked on, this notion of balance, I also feel that it's very much related to this concept. So I think opponent processing is not only about, let's say, the various interactions that we have between one another, but also it has to do, how do you say, on how we balance our own conflicts and our own conflicting impulses and goals. For example, how we can correct ourselves by waiting, let's say, and by engaging in this exercise of waiting, the pros and the cons of different options, or for example, by seeking feedback from our own experiences and and the outcomes. So in a way, it's a complex procedure that also has to do with memory, with past experiences, but also is deeply embedded into this enactivism, let's say. So I will say that opponent processing can be more broadly defined, if I am allowed to put it in this way, is through balancing of the opposing forces or the tendencies, let's say, that shape one's behavior and perception. We can achieve that by dialogues, by engaging in honest dialogue, let's say, in dialogues, but also we can do it from within, by thinking about something or even by engaging in an activity. As the example that Valeria showed with the holding something. So it's an act of balance.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Right. Well, when you were talking, an image popped into my head. It seemed like it's more than just balance, because I was thinking as well in terms of the right perspective on, you'd say, a 3D sculpture, but with two people, you can get one perspective and another perspective that gives you a greater image of the piece. And that seems like opponent processing, because you're looking at two different perspectives, like the two different motivations, the two different goals, but they allow you to see a greater image of the sculpture. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Peter, would you like to add something before we move on?
I was thinking about what Valeria had to say about this process. And it reminded me of what Joseph Campbell had to say about this symbol of the hands together. And he said that it's supposed to be greeting some kind of divinity, or there's some symbol of divinity between two hands coming together like this and pushing together. And I'm trying to find, I mean, this is probably just me just making a connection where there is none, but that really resonated with me about the opponent processing and what Joseph Campbell had to say about the symbol of divinity that people have when they pray. This is a symbol of prayer, and then people also have this when they greet someone else. So I don't know. There was something there that I was thinking about.
That's an interesting analogy, I think. You can have it in prayer, you can have it the soft way, let's say. They're still opposite of each other, maybe. Yeah, so interesting.
I mean, even the cross, the symbol of the cross with the horizontal dimension and the vertical dimension.
Vertical.
That's something that sometimes I feel, since we are extrapolating and making wild associations, but it feels like opponent process to me sometimes to reach for the horizontal, the mundane, the I don't know.
Oh yeah, wow! I've never picked up on that before.
Okay, then you tell me you tell me what I want to say, because I have mostly a feeling.
Yeah, and when people usually talk about that image, they usually talk about the center of the cross. It seems like the center has some significance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were talking about divinity, I was imagining that the divinity is only found when the hands are pushing against each other. Because it seems like, I mean, when you have your hands like this, it doesn't resonate in the same way. But
right,
it feels like the opponent processing allows for something greater in a sense. Like you see the position that you have when you are holding your tablet, Valeria. It can only be found with the opponent processing. So it allows for something greater. But I don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, I'm curious about what Peter thought about the cross. I'm really, honestly curious.
Well, I've got a buddy right now that's really into this theory called intelligent design, and I'm really not that into it. And earlier on in the episode where Vervaeke talks about opponent processing, he talks about evolution, and he says that the environment is so complex and differentiated and dynamically changing that Nietzsche's ways in which you can fit into the environment, promote your survival, this process of autopoiesis are varied and changing. And this was Darwin's insight. There is no essence to design. There's no essence to fittedness. So if you try to create a theory that determines the design of an organism from the essence of design, you are doomed because it doesn't exist. But this process seems to be real. This balance, finding this optimization, that seems to be a real process. And And it may be completely self-organizing, but it still seems to be able to give some kind of ability to connect to the logos, I guess is one way of thinking about it. But with the cross, I think it's the center of the cross would be the perfect optimization for opponent processing. But I don't know. I'm just trying to work these ideas out of my head.
Seems to me as well like if you'd say if the horizontal part of the cross was moved up a bit, the center would also change. And if it was moved down, the center would also change. And if the vertical part moved, the center would also change. And I don't know.
Sorry. The symbol of the cross for me has something about the horizontal being in the world, of the world, the mundane level of, you know, getting along in the mundane world, and the vertical, the divine, and reaching out for the divine, the spiritual, and all that. And speaking for me personally, sometimes there is a conflict in, should I just do what everybody else is doing and focusing on just fitting in, or should I look for the spiritual dimension? And sometimes it does feel a little bit like there is a conflict there, probably because I'm not wise enough, but it feels to me sometimes that there is a balance to be found.
It sounded to me like the horizontal was like an exploration, and the vertical was the plane of exploration. So there was, you could say the lowest is like the lowest things known to man, or the most fundamental things, or the most instinctual. I don't know if that's a word. Yeah, but then as you go higher, you'd be exploring higher levels, and then you'd say the highest is the most spiritual. But it's interesting that it's not in the horizontal part is not at the center. It's not like a plus sign, it's a bit higher, but it's also not at the top.
I see.
Yeah.
This talk actually reminded me a bit about Wolfgang Smith. More or less, he's talking about this distinction between the vertical and the horizontal. And also I find it very interesting, let's say, not only as a symbol, let's say the cross, but also as something that we keep on going back and back again. Another thing that came into mind is something, I don't know if you have ever heard about the concept of a true mirror. Have you ever engaged that? No? Okay, so most mirrors, the reflection that we see in the mirror, in a normal mirror, let's say, it's actually reversed. It's from left to right. So some years ago, approximately a decade or so, an inventor came up with this mirror that actually flips it once more. So when people, they watch their reflection, let's say, in that type of backward mirror, they actually see their self, how others perceive them. So it was always people that had this experience, they said that it was somewhat profound because they never had this, they always thought that there was something wrong with their face, but when they actually saw it through the eyes of the other, they understood that, oh, okay, so this is something that I never imagine, let's say, I will going to be able to witness. So that's also something else that popped into mind. I will try to share this clip so you can also see.
I think
So the thing that I'm thinking right now, it's the opponent processing between exploring all over the place and keeping it focused. So because I was thinking like, yeah, we are getting off topic, But that's also an example of opponent processing. How much do we want to allow for creativity and free exploration? And how much do we want to bring it back to the topic?
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew, especially with learning.
Maybe both allow the process of understanding the topic. Yeah.
I just wanted to go away a little bit further. So just I was thinking and the perception of ourselves, but not the way we see ourselves in the mirror, because it's reversed like that, basically, but as other people perceive us. And that was, I think it's like an interesting, very vivid kind of explanation. Coming back to relevance realization and opponent processing, I don't know, it's a feeling, it's an exploration right now. I was thinking there were people who had damaged that chaotic, impulsive part, creative, and only had the logical part of the brain functioning. And they were completely lacking the decision-making skills. They were just like trying to overanalyze everything. And that creative opposite side of the brain that would help them to pick up random things did not work. So in order to find the relevant information or to make a choice, we kind of need both. And I was thinking if it is related to opponent processing somehow, the tension between two brains, left brain and the right brain.
That was what I was thinking about as well.
Oh, nice.
In terms of the, in terms of, because it doesn't really happen like in my head. I've also realized it happened to me in terms of what I'm interested in. I don't know exactly how it maps out, but I guess I'll see. So yeah, in the head, there's the side of the creativity dealing with uncertainty, but there's also the side of logic and dealing with things that are known. So it seems to me like I'm also split in terms of my interests, because I do love the creative side of things. I love doing art and listening and making music, but at the same time, I also love doing maths, which seems like a very logical, and those two sort of help each other in what I've experienced. Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned the left and the right brain.
Einstein was a violinist as well. He played the violin. There's like some images that warm my heart. Okay, guys, anybody wants to add something else before we move on to the clip?
Maybe go ahead, Ebenezer.
Okay. I wanted to add the idea of the eyes and how our perception is allowed, like how we're able to see something in the foreground and separate from the background, because we have two eyes with different information, that help us perceive.
Go ahead, Kara. I will. It will come up. It was just another example, but it will come up. Go. Let's see the clip.
Let me try it. I hope it. Okay. I always like worry a little bit that my computer will crash if I.
Let's call John to the room.
Okay.
That's how it looks.
Yes, that's how it looks. There it is, the clip I prepared. There it is. Okay. Okay, hold on. You're sharing with the sound. Okay. Tell me if you can hear it.
You put the two together like this in what's called opponent processing, and they're constantly pushing and pulling on each other. Systems that are heuristically biased, they don't search the whole space. They're very biased, right? And then you put them in opponent processing together, and they are constantly pulling. Notice what I'm doing with my left and right hands. Yes, yes, right, right. Left and right hand. I'm pulling, right, like this. Opponent processing, so that, right, my level of arousal is constantly evolving its fittedness to the context. Now, is it a perfect system? No, it can go wrong. But try to make something better than it. It's really, really hard. So there's a difference between being a perfect system and being an optimal system. Okay. You face another problem. What should you pay attention to? That's not what you do. You're not doing that. At least I hope not. What's actually happening is you've got opponent processing going on. You've got a default mode network and a task focus network. The task focus network is trying to keep you on task and exclude as much as it can from the task. Let's push. Notice what's going on here? Oh, yeah. See it? Yeah? You see why I want to talk about this at length? Okay? Pushing away, right? And then the default mode network is making you prone to mind wandering. So suppose this was not a riveting, interesting talk. Suppose it was really boring. Suppose I was talking about, well, you know, for quite some time I have been collecting porcelain cows. And the porcelain, right? And then what will happen is you will drift away. You will drift away. And when you're in meditation, you can feel these two all the time. And you're actually playing with them. Now, if you just drifted away, it'd be very problematic to you. If you just so why don't I just stay? Why can't I just stay task focused? The problem when you stay task focused is you may not be noticing what you need to notice. There's not enough variation. So the mind wandering takes you away. It introduces new things you might think about, and then you kill off most of them, bring them back, and then it just keeps doing that. And that's how you evolve your attention. There's no boss. It's constantly doing that. You face another problem. There's two sets of problems, two kinds of problems in the world. There are problems that are very familiar to you, very well defined, like 24 times 3. You know what kind of problem it is. It's a multiplication problem, so you know what operations you can perform. You know what the goal state looks like. When you're done doing multiplication, you should have a number. You shouldn't have a picture of a squirrel. You know, and you know what operations you're allowed to perform. You know that singing is irrelevant. But there are ill-defined problems. These are problems in which your initial state, your goal state, and your operations are unclear to you. I mentioned that in my talk. Giving a good talk is an ill-defined problem. Participating in a conversation is an ill-defined problem. So what should you do? And what you should do is maybe divide the brain into two systems. One that works to direct attention for well-defined problems. So it looks for detail, step by step. Because if he and I are both doing a multiplication problem, the one that does it more step by step with individual care is going to do better. So you've got a part of the brain that's going to be dedicated step by step, individual, right? Look for certainty, pursue clarity. That's really good for well-defined problems. We're doing multiplication. Now an eagle swoops in towards our head. I don't want to be doing that. Well, is it an eagle? What kind of eagle is it? Right? So now, right, when you have problems that require a gestalt, that you deal with all of the problem sort of all at once, processing everything in parallel, and that part is designed to deal with ambiguity and urgency, and that's the right hemisphere. This is Ian McGilchrist that some of you know. I have a talk with him coming out soon. And
Sorry. Okay, guys, that was the clip. And the step-by-step processing, that's the part I wanted to discuss. So it's so like that aspect of opponent processing. Would you like to elaborate more on that, Peter?
That's what Benita was talking about. Sorry, with the precise certainty versus creative gestalt. Sorry, Peter, go.
Cara, could you send that video in the chat? I'd like to look at that talk. I haven't heard that one before, and that was amazing. That was Vervaeke definitely at his best, I think. So
yes, okay. I will post it in the chat right now, but and later I will add it also in the description.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, that was phenomenal. That was great. The task mode network and the default mode network, and this process of zooming out or zooming in and then zooming out, and how your attention can be caught, and how you also need to direct your attention. And I mean, this kind of echoes back to what we were talking about last week about how sometimes we'll be programming and we'll get hyper focused on something. And since this is such a well-defined domain, we have an expectation about what we're supposed to be seeing for a solution and what operations we have to take to get there. And we're doing that and we're not getting the solution, and it's frustrating. And so we take a break and we go for a walk and we let that part of our brain settle down and let other parts activate and get different information to consider. And maybe not even necessarily consciously. And then when we go and sit back down, we can approach it from a different angle, an angle that it was impossible to see before, but now we can see it. And so now we can solve it. And I thought that was an excellent way of describing the concept from Vervaeke.
Yeah, I agree. I find that particular talk with between John and Jonathan Pajot an excellent one. And if I am not mistaken, in that particular talk, and John offers an actual short description of what opponent processing is, and it can be summarized as follows. The best way I can correct myself is through you, and vice versa, let's say. So he tries to make this actual, let's say, reciprocity, to attach this reciprocity element into between the agents, let's say, that share the same space.
Is that like what marriage is, or relationships? Because that's the first thing that came to mind. It's like in a marriage you because usually they say when you're married you become one, but it's still two different minds with different opinions. But it's almost like that's built to strengthen both of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was reminded of, I don't know if it's a saying, but people usually say two is better than one. Yeah. Because when one person falls down, the other can help them up, and it's like two different positions, because one person is on the ground, but the other person is up, and that sort of helps them move together. And I don't know, the same thing I've seen with marriage. Like you have a goal where you want to go, but then another voice comes in and says, what about this other thing? And then you have the whole, like, I guess, argument about which things to care about. But then that brings you to, like, it brings you to a much more precise way. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Can we talk more about that? I'm a little confused on that subject. Are you talking about like an opponent processing of a social connection?
Yes, in a sense.
Go ahead.
No, I think you should add, Valeria.
Yeah, maybe the
Yeah.
example that I was thinking will help. I'm thinking about a couple that I met, and that there are several couples that end up in some kind of opponent process in some way. So this particular one, the man was very gregarious. Is that the word? They lived in an eco village or kind of thing, and they planted their own vegetables. So they needed to care that they had enough to eat in the winter. They didn't have much money. But the man was always like sharing and caring and like being social, and the woman was always like, "No, but are you thinking about this?" And it worked somehow. You could see the tension, but the tension was productive. Or sometimes you see it in parents, like one parent is always taking the perspective of the child and being nurturing and caring, and the other is always taking the perspective of like discipline and
Yeah.
one wants to give the toy, the other has arguments for why giving the toy is not a good. So there are several examples where people end up with these different roles. I don't know if that helps. And there's tension, but the tension helps the system be better.
It's like positive. It's what you said. Like it's not that they're not. I don't know. I'm going to paraphrase, but it seems like you said they're not against each other. They're not working to destroy each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's to better the system or whatever the system they're in. Interesting.
They're not fighting for dominance. They are just paying attention to different things. And because they're paying attention to different things, they are giving importance to different things.
It makes the picture fuller.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found the same thing with art. But I guess sometimes when I'm showing somebody my art, usually it's just a one-on-one conversation. Sometimes it's with many people, but even then you can have a sort of opponent processing. But it's interesting that when you have a perspective and then you give an opposing one and let those two talk to each other, even in argument, it seems like you get a deeper understanding of both of them, of what the painting is, because you're both looking at it from different perspectives, and your understanding enriches the conversation. Yeah.
To summarize, it's both the balance in between, but also the tension.
Yeah.
That's the processing. Okay. Harris, do you like to add something?
Yeah, I like your summary. I was thinking about something similar. It's, let's say, the balancing of opposing forces, but also the balancing of flexibility that arises out of the dance, let's say, of these forces. And hopefully in the best scenario, as Benister said, like in a marriage, it's like an elegant dance. It's not like something that it's violent or in high conflict, but it's something that it's more of like a dance. This is how I perceive it.
I perceive it in the same way to do with virtues. Well, I've connected it to some virtues that I've been thinking about when we do dialectic interdialogos in conversation about certain virtues. It seems like it's the balance is a dance between the too much and the too little, and it's trying to find the middle ground, but the middle ground is not always the center.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about opponent processing. It's dynamic, and it's also very much dependent on the environment that you're in. Yeah, like let's say you want to know how much you should dress, but it's sunny outside and you're trying to stay warm. So you should dress light on a sunny day, but on a cold day, you put more clothes on to have the same amount of warmth. And it's your senses that are opposing each other. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like this is found everywhere.
Mhm.
That's why I've been saying that I've seen it everywhere after I heard about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Wow. Super apt. It's that all this independent convergence, all this explanatory power. Very elegant theory.
Yeah, but often, if you think about how the Eastern thought with the yin and yang is different from our way of thinking, of always trying to find out what is the good and what is the bad, and just getting always more of the good instead of thinking of things in terms of having
Yes.
good and bad sides.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember thinking about height and weight the other day, and everybody in my generation is so concerned about being tall or being fit. And I remember thinking, you know, you don't want to lose too much weight, and you don't want to be like overtly tall. Like, how much tallness is too tall? I remember talking with a friend, and he was like, "Oh yeah, just like it's a linear, it's linear, a linear equation. You know, the taller you are, the more valuable you are." And I thought, what if you're 100 feet tall? Like, that seems to be a little too much.
How much is
So
that in centimeters?
yeah. So I don't know. I would imagine it's
300.
I'll ask.
300. Okay. Well, it's yeah. So it's there is such thing as too much, you know? And so I think we confuse ourselves with having too much. But I know there are other things that I kind of have a harder time trying to argue against, like money. Is there such thing as having too much money? That seems to be something that people just try to maximize, that there is no end to. It just goes into infinity. So
I'm wondering, because it seems like all the examples we're given are the results of opponent processing, like what we use to determine what is too much and too little is a combination of two underlying things opposing each other. So I'm wondering what the two things that are the two motivations that are opposing each other in when thinking about money, like what motivates you to have less money?
Well, instead of talking about having money, thinking about money or prioritizing money. And then it becomes clear, right? Like, do you always save money? Do you spend all your life thinking about how to make money? How much of your cognitive resources? Because the reason why John talks about this concept is to explain cognition and relevance realization and the bioeconomics of our cognition. And so how much of my attention should I put on money? My time, attention, resources, should I put on making money? And then the answer is clear. It's definitely not all of it.
But some people do find that it's all of it. I don't know how they get there.
I was thinking about the decision making. Again, I'm trying to understand still the relevance realization. And opponent processing is a part of it, let's say. It's like, like we cannot take everything into consideration. We will have the combinatorial explosion, if I pronounce it correctly. But then we cannot take random stuff either out of nowhere, because we will not make the right decision this way as well. So we need to find that, let's say, perfect Goldilocks decision, but the perfect Goldilocks decision, it always moves depending on the situation. So that process in between, the dance in between all the possibilities and all the relevant possibilities, I guess. It's still a sense, is still a sense there? Like, is there, am I completely off?
I don't think
Not-
you are.
No, I don't think that you are either, but not perfect.
Good enough, I think.
Good enough, yeah. Because that's what John said, you cannot do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So the link here is that one way in which we are better in finding out what we should be paying attention to is to have two systems that are biasing us to pay attention in things that are opposing to each other. Should I pay attention to everything that comes to my mind, or should I pay attention just to this one thing? Should I pay attention to the things that are dangerous and exciting and agitating, or should I pay attention to the things that make me calm and tranquil? What else should I pay attention to earning
Rest and
money
work.
or spending the money? You know.
I'm very grateful for the people in the chat and in the room. And I always, when I host live streams, I was like, should I pay attention to the people in my room, or should I pay attention to the people in the chat? Should I pay attention to the people in my room or in the chat? They're not exactly adversarial to each other. They're different, but like they're both important, and that kind of
Maybe the bigger one
analogy.
Maybe the big one is like, should I pay attention to both of them or to just one? Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I've got the same thing with sound when I'm doing sound. It's very okay. It's a bit annoying, but it helps. So usually when doing like a mix for a live event, something always goes wrong, but you don't really know where it comes from. Yeah. So the battle is sort of between, should I listen to this one specific instrument, or should I listen to just everything in general? Should I listen to like this one singer, or is it the whole group of singers? That's the issue. Should I reduce the volume of one of the instruments, or is it because the bass is all the bass instruments are too high? And it was moving between those two, but it helps me find a balance. Yeah, it's quite annoying, but it's the tension, but the peaceful balance. Yeah,
I find it especially interesting when you get the chance to partner up with somebody who you can work in opponent process with, like somebody who pays attention to different things than you do. So I have a friend, for example, that we have completely different strategies for dealing with conflict. So when in a conflict situation, my tendency is to go to the bottom of it, try to understand, try to get to the reason and to solve it. Her strategy is to lighten things up, make a joke, disperse the energy. Oh my God, that used to drive me crazy. And then we kind of, I think I can say the name. It's Alexandra Zachary. Alexandra, if you're watching this, I've told her that.
She's asleep.
She's asleep in Australia right now. But I have learned a lot from my irritation with her about how sometimes the best thing to do is to just lighten things up and disperse the energy and give people the opportunity to because when you are too much in the conflict, you are like the one-track minded, and then you are caught in this well of it's the same thing with the programming, right? You need to get out of it so that you regain your cognitive flexibility.
Well, yeah, that's great. That's aptly put. I remember one time I was, if you know me, I ask a lot of questions in the Discord server. I'm
That's
always
awesome.
asking questions, and I do that in other servers as well. And someone said, "Hey, why don't you just Google these?" And I thought, well, I don't really know. You know, there's something different about talking with somebody about these things than there is just, you know, doing a Google search. And he said, well, if you're just going to, you know, if you want an answer and you're going to people on these Discord servers asking these questions, then you're going to get responses from, you know, people that aren't experts in the field. And I remember that struck me. Then I thought about it very deeply, and he kind of came across more of a instead of an opponent processor as an antagonistic processor, where he just thought what I was doing was completely wrong. And in the moment, I thought I was completely right. I was like, no, you know, as the iron sharpens iron, brother sharpens brother. I'm doing this for, you know, more perspectively rather than propositionally. But after thinking about it, I think I don't think he was entirely wrong. You know, I don't think his criticism of what I was doing was entirely wrong. Just like what you were saying, Valeria, about how sometimes pulling the weed out at the root is not actually the best solution for solving a problem, because sometimes you can't actually get at the root, or when you think you do have the root, you don't have it. And so I think there is a balance to be found between learning something on your own and trying to get a deeper understanding of it, and then learning something in dialogos and doing it with other people and getting other people's perspectives and finding what they find relevant. And so yeah, I guess there's just wisdom to be found in unexpected places, especially if you're engaged in opponent processing.
It was interesting that both of you, I guess, created, well, when both of you are talking, I noticed that it was almost like their voices were in your head, and it was arguing with what you thought. And I was thinking in that sense, like that could help with opponent processing. I mentioned this in the other live stream, but it helps me get out of reciprocal narrowing. Having an opposing voice, but it's not antagonistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful. It's like, how about you look at it from this other perspective,
Right?
and then and then you have a fuller image of what you're looking at or what you're exploring.
Yeah, it almost kind of
And
reminds me of Socrates' daemon, or internalizing the sage.
Yeah, and it seems like that. In both your situations, it's not like one perspective or the other helped you get to a better understanding. It's both of them, because with one you would be pulled to one extreme, but with the other you'd also be pulled to the other one. It was both of them working together. Yeah.
This again.
Guys, I have a question from the audience. So it's from Carl. He's like, how does the law of diminishing returns play into the opponent processing? Harris.
Yeah. Thank you. Also to Carl. We miss you, Carl. So first of all, I find it very, very informative, the whole discussion that is taking place. It actually reminded me of some of the insights that I've gained from my own, let's say, career and research field that has to do with not only cognition, but also project management and managing teams. And one of the, let's say, of the quotes that stands out over all these years is a quote from Dr. Meredith Belpin that actually said the following: what is needed in teams, in successful teams, is not well-balanced individuals, but individuals that balance well together. So it's once again is this concept of opponent processing and bringing different contrasting elements together, and to try to answer to Car's question now. Of course, what we are trying to understand here is that by investing our time into this theory of opponent processing, in a way, we are going against the law of diminishing returns, because it's like we're, in a way, going against, moving against the entropy, let's say, of the system that always tends to lead to, where information tends to lead to more and more disordered, let's say, or diminish returns. And we can accomplish this by providing some clarity and simplicity. So if we manage to understand and simplify this concept by enacting it, basically, this is what John also tries to promote with this enactivist theory that connects the big five, let's say, with opponent processing. We can actually gain instead of losing. That's it from my side.
Thank you. Valeria, you have something to add?
No, I'm thinking about it, but I don't know. I don't know. I will tell you if I think about anything, but right now I don't.
Thank you. Peter?
Well, I would just say that the law of diminishing returns is opponent processing. So if you zoom out too much, you necessarily lose the finer details. But if you zoom in too much, then you necessarily lose the bigger picture. So I would say that they just are the same thing, as far as I can tell, that the law of diminishing returns is opponent processing, or at least opponent processing is the law of diminishing returns is the product of opponent processing. And so yeah, either they're the same thing or they just go hand in hand.
Or it's an example. The law of diminishing returns is an example of opponent processing.
Oh, yeah, that's probably a better way of putting it.
Well, I learned a lot. That was interesting. And so basically, to summarize a little bit what I learned so far, it's how we get the picture fuller, how we understand the situation fuller. If we use that, we use opponent processing. We use it also for decision making, for relevance realization, and of course, a law of diminishing returns is an example of opponent processing, if I understand correctly. And we can find it everywhere. It's this dance, it's this tension, it's this movement. I remember when you guys were talking about the divine and the cross and this tension, I was thinking about the dot in the let's say vacuum, just like this one dot. And if you shine a light on the dot, and if it, like, let's say, spreads the light like that, so light comes from the top, it stops on a dot, and then it goes, it divides itself like that. So I was thinking for some reason of this type of creating this effect visually. It would not happen if the light would come from the dot. I mean, it would go like that maybe. Yeah, I'm contradicting myself. So help me out, guys.
Well, it isn't a contradiction, isn't it? Or it's not a contradiction, it's a causal loop. I think Vervaeke even uses that term, a feedback loop. Yeah, it's a feedback
Mhm.
loop. So
Mhm.
if you map it out logically, it'll be a contradiction. So you can't actually map it out purely logically.
Yeah, one
think,
thing that makes it, one thing that makes understanding a lot of the things that Vervaeke talks about difficult is this feedback loops, because we are thinking of, we are used to thinking in terms of A causes B causes C, and to this, we are used to thinking linearly. But a lot of the things that he talks about is things that are like the example that I gave with the me as a child learning to swing without nobody pushing, without anybody pushing. It's not about like I give an impulse and then the thing will go. It's like the resonance. And so a lot of it, it's I pay attention to things that are important, and things that are important catch my attention. So there are a lot of things, they have this loops, which makes it a lot of it makes it unintuitive to understand with the cognitive grammar that we have.
That's when we were talking about the divinity and the cross-site, I realized something. And it's almost like I don't know, to me, I visualize it as a triangle. Because when I think opponent processing, I think 2 points that are going in opposite directions. So I think of it in a graph manner. So there's 2 points, but the magnitude, I mean they're going in opposite directions. But then it's almost like that opposition creates like something greater.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've seen it like, well, not recently, but in politics, in the sense that they have this side that is very left-leaning. I don't like those words. This side that is right-leaning, and then they oppose each other, but that helps, you'd say, balance the interests of the nation as a whole. And there's the thing that's above what they're opposing. And it's almost like I have my interests and you have yours. But then when we have opponent processing, there's a greater interest that comes. And that sounds like what the divinity is to me.
Yeah, the thing with politics is an example of one thing that should be opponent processing and often turns into adversarial processing, and then
chaos.
Yeah, it's just seeking dominance instead of trying to seek the relevance.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing that happens with all relationships? They have the potential to get adversarial, and that takes away the value of opponent processing.
That would be great if that, I mean, I know that more than half of marriages here in the United States end up in divorce, and I want to figure out why that is. So it sounds like marriage is something that's extremely complex, but if it is just a problem with opponent processing, then that would be great, because then I think that has a pretty easy solution to it.
I'm laughing because it's not just because you can formulate that doesn't mean
such
that
an
you
easy
practice
solution.
it.
I guess that's true. Yeah, easy
Every
problem,
marriage,
hard solution.
Yeah, they
I
just
can
need
tell
one
you.
lesson on opponent processing. Yeah.
There is another opponent processing at play here that makes it difficult, and that is my interest versus our interest. So I understand my interest better than our interest. I have a better picture of what I want, what I feel, the world through my eyes, than the picture of the bird's eye vision. So in the dialectic between part and whole of the group, in the opponent process between my interests and the interests of the group. I have a responsibility of presenting my interests in a way, because I know it better, what I need, what I want, what I can, what I know. I know myself better than the group. But obviously, I do not want to fight for dominance with the group. I want to have the group, the vision of the group or the diet or the marriage and my vision, and have this opponent process between the individual and the group working well. And getting that right, it's not always very simple. But we try.
Yeah,
It's true.
and I think it's the same thing with friend groups. Well, I've noticed it with mine, because friend groups are like they have humans in it with their own lives, and everyone has their own things going on. But it's about whether you should focus on the whole group or you should zero in on this one person and explore them a little more. But if you do that too much, then you lose the connection to the group. So it's moving between those two, and it's quite interesting.
And by the way, people often get it wrong by not representing their side well enough in a group, in a diet, in a couple. They focus too much on the others and do not present what they want. And that makes it worse for everybody. So you can get it wrong on that side too.
Yeah, this is an important distinction that you've made there, Valeria. And I think maybe it's one of the prime issues that surround relevance. What is relevant to one agent may not be relevant to the group, or maybe some people, they just fail to explain the very same concept with the exact same definition. So it also has to do with maybe going back to these personalities, let's say typologies and the big five. Maybe it also has to do with how with issues like openness, how open is someone, how willing is to express oneself, and what type of opponent processing takes place not only, as I said before, not only in our interpersonal relationships, but also within each of us.
My husband is always complaining or talking about how the conflict between the openness and neuroticism is playing out for him. Like the openness wants him to go out in adventures and explore and do things, and the neuroticism is like, hey, no, the world is full of danger.
Mm-hmm. I actually am curious about the generative aspect of opponent processing, and let's say, of course, it's the goal. I wanted a little bit to go back to the adversarial, where it becomes not generative. Sometimes it actually becomes destructive in a sense. And then there is this interesting through line with what Harris said about personalities and the openness, and let's say people who are let's say prone to conflict. How was it? Disagreeable.
Low and agreeable.
Disagreeable.
Yes, so disagreeable. So there are like agreeable people and disagreeable people, and there was this idea of too much agreeable, not generative. Too much disagreeable, also not generative. And so that kind of did not formulate it perfectly, but you guys got the sense of it. I hope out of this mosaic and word salad you can make something. So what do you guys think?
I think that goes to what Valeria was saying in her example about the way that one person does not talk about or bring up their understanding or their position on a topic. It's that sense in which when you're too agreeable, you're only taking in the other person. It's like this hand is very weak. So when this one tries to find a balance, it just ends up pushing it the other way. But when this one is too stiff, too rigid, this one, whatever it does, it can't really move it. So when this is the right place to be, it doesn't allow for the adaptability, because it's almost like the dance that you were talking about. It's like flowing easily, adapting to each environment. But when there's too much of one or too much of the other, it doesn't allow for that smooth process. Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah, the weak versus rigid there was that was a very good image.
Thank you.
Man, and the rigidity too. I remember in After Socrates, Vervaeke said, a dialogos is not both sides being absolutely rigid and trying to dominate the other side. It's like you said, a dance. And if you're going to have a conversation with someone and they're just completely rigid, then what's the point of having the conversation? And vice versa for you. If you're just completely rigid, then why have the conversation? So yeah, there has to be a mix or a balance. And I think going back to disagreeable and agreeableness, if someone who's very disagreeable isn't careful, then they'll push too far, and someone who's agreeable that isn't careful, they'll be pushed too far. So
I think that also goes back to the idea of relevance realization. And tell me if I'm wrong or if you have a different perspective, but it seems to me like the opponent processing is built for adaptability. Like the goal is not to find the center, but it's the goal is not perfection. It's just the just enough, the just right place. And
right.
It's not a specific place. It's like you were saying, Peter. It's not one. I forgot exactly what you were talking about, the Darwin theory. It's
Darwin
not
theory?
one thing. Yes, it's not one thing, but it's like an adaptability. That seems like the goal.
Yeah. Well, perfection implies completeness, and there's no completeness.
Yeah. To be honest, it reminded me the game of Jenga, as I was hearing to Ebenezer. Like you are trying to balance and you're trying to find the best move, let's say, that it's good enough so you can progress.
Yeah. And it's not the perfect move, because when playing Jenga,
it's good enough.
Exactly. Because I've played Jenga with quite a few, different people. And when you try to get the perfect move, it makes the game worse. Because it makes it more difficult for others, you'd say. Or there's so many aspects to it. But if you find the just right place, the place that is good enough for you, but good enough for others, easy enough for you, but not too difficult, not too easy for you that it like hinders others in the future, and not too difficult that you end up messing up the whole game. And it's that balance. Yeah, that's interesting.
I've got a question. What if somebody says something like they're really nihilistic and they're really pessimistic and they think, well, the tower is just going to collapse anyways, so why not speed that process along and make these moves that are going to sabotage the whole collective effort?
Because then there's no point in playing.
Oh, so this is
Just
the
say more about that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, tell us.
Well, the point that is the telic and the paratelic, that the reversal theory that John talks about. It's not his concept, but some things you do for the goal and some things you do for the process, the activity for its own sake. You're not playing Jenga for a purpose. The purpose is the playing. So as long you want to play as long as possible, you want to keep that tower alive as much. That is the goal.
Is that the same thing with evolution? It's not to get to
Ooh.
a specific point, but it's to
Yeah.
keep the
Well,
game.
there couldn't be that. I mean, Vervaeke talked about that. There is no final product for evolution. It's just an open-ended ongoing process.
Mm.
So I don't see the end for it. But going back to the Jenga tower, I mean, that reminds me, is it all, I guess sometimes it is about the destination instead of the journey. Is that what you're saying, Valeria? Because I've always heard it's always about the journey, never the destination.
That doesn't make much sense, right?
That it's not about the destination sometimes, just the journey, or that.
No, that it's always about just the journey. That goal-oriented behavior doesn't make sense. That's pretty much what you're saying.
Mm.
The way I was thinking about it was, personally, if the goal is not good enough, then I wouldn't be that interested in the journey. So there's also that balance that has to be there.
So there
In the
does have to
goal
be a
and the journey?
destination. Sorry, go ahead, Kara.
No, I wanted to say so it's a process, or it's the tension between the final goal and the journey itself.
Yeah.
So
'Cause
if it would be
even-
just to keep the tower alive for as long as possible, then you would just leave the tower and
Yeah.
not build it anymore.
But there's
It's
still
a-
the goal
it's-
of trying to make the tallest tower.
The tallest tower and make it and yet because it collapses, it makes it worthwhile somehow. So that let's say, how to say it, the highest score you get, utopia score. So that that movement, that tension between the goal and the process itself, they're both important. One without the other makes no sense.
Yes.
Somehow we have this tendency to always try to find the solution. It's always about the journey. You always have to stay in the moment, and then we come up with these things that if you look at them a little bit, they don't make any sense.
Right. Yeah, I've heard this. So the mindfulness, it's always just confine yourself to the present, past and future don't exist. And I thought, what's the point of the present? Like, so
if
I
there's no
love
future
that.
to work for, and
Yeah.
no past to help you.
I also wanted to make another, let's say, analogy here with gaming and serious play. Before we were discussing about materialism and that the goal is always to maximize profit, let's say. Okay, of course, I understand that in the sense of a for-profit organization, the ethical purpose of the organization is to make profit. That's what the, let's say, the business ethics side of things is. But going back to the analogy with the games, I can imagine that some people playing Jenga and some other people just playing Monopoly. So both of them, of course, they are into it, but they like the playing and not necessarily, let's say, the end goal. So I can imagine some people that they are really into Monopoly and they are not into Jenga, and vice versa.
Just thought of a crazy idea of it's always a tension between Monopoly and Jenga. If it's not about the way.
How can we make the world like? how can we deal well with people that like Jenga and people that like Monopoly?
No. The answer is simple. Monopoly always. Okay.
Monopoly.
I don't know what the argument is all about. Seems obvious to me.
Clearly a Monopoly person.
I mean, I play both, but like sometimes I can actually, did you guys try, like you can actually put on one thing, you can put all of them, you can make it like out of one, how many things you can put on one block. So Jenga, I'm talking about Jenga.
Wow.
So Jenga, I was able to put 38 on one block, starting like that, and all 38 would be on top of it. I have a picture somewhere. So I was like doing that. Kind of score.
The thing that plays in my mind when thinking about Jenga and Monopoly is time. Because one can be a very quick game and then you put it away. And at the same time, the games can be repetitive. So you can choose when to stop. But the other one, you're in it for the long haul. Like with my family, we start at around 6 p.m. We finished midnight.
Oh.
Usually, sometimes it gets late. But you're in it for the long haul. There's no place to exit. Yeah. But it's interesting, like the time that it takes, like and determining between what is too much and too little, or what is just enough. Yeah.
The thing I don't like about Monopoly is that some people have to stop playing before the game is over.
Yeah, they get eliminated.
Yeah. And then like, what is the point of me continuing playing if the other person cannot play with me? That there's something dissatisfying about it.
Yeah, there's like
I'm
that
clearly
element
a
of
Jenga
annihilation.
Yeah.
To be honest, I love both. So having a little bit of trouble to, how do you say, to choose?
To pick a side.
Yeah, to decide. But I understand both perspectives, let's say. I am leaning a bit towards Jenga.
Okay. Welcome back, Ebenezer. So, guys, before we finish, because we are already coming next to the end, I would like this sort of practice that I picked up on Valeria's mindful relating that she does twice a week. It's the idea of checking out. What did you live with after participating in mining Vervaeke? I wanted to say mindful relating. Like
mindful Vervaeke. Let's go.
Oh, mindful Vervaeke. Mindful in Vervaeke. Yes, that one. Okay, and I would like to start with Ebenezer.
Well, for me, I think the thing that is most present in my mind is the idea that they're not antagonistic. The opponent processes, they're not antagonistic. They work together for a higher purpose. I think that's what's sticking out to me the most. Yeah, I might have another answer at the end because that usually happens, like when I go first. Yeah, but that's me for now.
Peter?
Well, I think what stuck out the most for me was the idea that opponent processing is open-ended, and that it's not about maximizing one thing over another, but it's about trying to find the right balance between them. And so it's, I know that everybody talks about, trying to relax, take deep breaths, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And I had an idea that the sympathetic nervous system was just evil as a result. It's like, it's bad. you know, because we're always trying to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So why do we even have this other thing? And I think this conversation has helped me see that just because the other side or a other side is different, or I can't make sense of it, doesn't necessarily make it wrong or evil. That there could be a purpose to it that I just can't see. And also with the Jenga game, you know, now I kind of see life like that, where it's like there is this principle of mortality, you know. But I always remember Vervaeke said, to have meaning in life is to be connected to something outside yourself, to feel like you're connected to something bigger than you are. So maybe it's like a Jenga puzzle that you're trying to build as tall as you can, while also connecting that to something else, so that when you're gone, you've added something to something else. Maybe something like that. I'll have to think of that one some more. But yeah, that's what I got.
I like it. That's beautiful. Harris?
Yeah, I also like it. I also had something to add a bit there to what Peter just said. Going back to the analogy with the Jenga, or life as a Jenga game, I'm gonna play a bit with words here. I often hear people saying that one can obtain safely the low-hanging fruits, let's say. So one can obtain safely the low-hanging Jenga pieces, and then you have to put it with extra care on top. So the show must go on, or the game can go on. So yeah, this is what I understand. It's a nice analogy. It has to do with structure too. So and also with different parts. So it's like different compartments, and we can understand it as we are a unit that is one part of a larger whole. So yeah, I like this aspect of multiplicity in terms of opponent processing, and also this dual aspect of open-ended aspect, as Peter said before, of the intrapersonal, but also from within, let's say, oneself. Yeah, overall it was interesting, and I've managed to clarify these concepts even more. So thank you all for that.
And before we hear Valeria, I would like to hear point of Ebenezer.
So I found it. I found the thing that was more interesting to me. It seems like, well, I have a feeling it's going to play out in my head the whole week, but it seems like the idea that the opponent processing is for the purpose of participating, like the Jenga game. It's not directly the goal, but at the same time, it's not just the journey. It's not just the destination and journey. It's like this is a dynamic movement. I hadn't thought of that before this, but it seems like it's more interesting that it's that game. Yeah.
Thank you. And Valeria?
Yeah, the open-ended, I would add also dynamic, and because we're always trying to find the solution that will, the one ring that will roll them out, and then everything will be fine once we find the solution, and then that's the solution that we use. And this discussion highlights the fact that for many things, the process of finding the solution is ongoing, and we have to do it. There is not one solution. We need to keep the tension alive. We need to keep the dialectic. We need to keep the opponent processing alive, because that's what is helping the system be adaptable in an ongoing basis. Another thing that is in my mind is the tension between my perspective and the perspective of the groups that I participate in, the dyads, the relationships, and the importance of clarity and care. So always caring for the relationship, but caring for my participation also in making clear my point of offering my point of view, my perspective, my wishes, my desires to the relationship, because that's also important. Imagine a group when we get everybody's perspective and everybody's sincere and contributing, that makes it so much richer than if we just in dialogos, for example, we can be too rigid, but also just agreeing with everybody all the time, that doesn't have the richness. If I had just said to Peter, yeah, rigidity, and left it there instead of saying no, but there's also this other aspect. There's if it's offered with the wish to contribute, that makes it so much richer. So those are the things that I would offer. And yeah, thank you, Carol, for organizing, and thank all of you. And the cognitive science bit that especially Peter and Harry's brought in, I loved it. So thank you for that too.
And Ezra's artistic one as well. And Valeria is very knowledgeable in all the subject. Guys, this is collective cognition that we're doing here, right? Am I using the term correctly?
Distributed?
I think.
Yes, yes, we are. But distributed, yes.
Okay, so this is distributed cognition.
The collective intelligence. If I
collective intelligence, distributed cognition. Yeah, operating in those terms, to the people who aren't operating in those terms regularly, might seem like a secret language, and yet I would like it to be just a little bit more understood. So here is a little bit of the announcement. People, thank you so much who are in the comments and watch later as well. I would like for you to maybe write in the chat or in the comments underneath this video what subject you would like to be discussed next week, and I will make the decision by Tuesday. And again, everybody, thank you so much for this collective intelligence practice that we just did. And I hope it was generative and useful. And see you all next